quo, the mother of the hood wives. Off this no fold, just talking love to my niggas. Stay up and fold, just bless the hands in the mouths like God is grown. See the time is close, open ways like dormant. Forget the doubt, love the women in here, cause they gave us clout, freedom over power. So tell me what your thought juice is, cause I bring the bottles and the truth is I'ma lay it out for all the fools here. I make it clear, 100-proof pit, ayy. Princess E money, time to cash out. No commando for the shortest, hard clits out. Do a little dance, shake a little ass. I'm just tryna ask, what's your thought juice? Dun dun dun.
What is up, everybody? It is your girl / boy, Iman Loren like Polo. Welcome to another episode of the Real Hoodwives of Chicago, Season 3, Episode 7, motherfucking Pride Month. Pew, 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 pew. Like, yes, thank you all so much to be here in collaboration with Chicago For Real. I appreciate my team. Thank you to all the Hoodwives of Chicago. We go live every other Thursday, 7 p.m., and y'all have made it here. I have the one, the only, I've been gassing them up for the longest. Like, I feel like they don't believe me at this point, but that's okay. So we have the one and only Benji Hart. Yes, they can't hear you, but they can hear you. They can hear you. But I'm releasing air horns. Please make some noise for Benji Hart, everybody. Make sure that you like, comment, subscribe, drop hearts, do everything that you need to do to support your love, to show support to our love, Benji Hart. How you doing?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so honored and excited to be here, for real.
Thank you so much for being here. I've been, like I said, been gassing you up for the past, first of all, Benji was on time. Okay. So I was like, damn, wow. I've never had somebody be on time. Like, I don't have to sweat. I don't have to do none of that. So
that's what I like. I'm not going to say it's my proudest feature, but it's definitely one of my most prominent features. I like to be early. I like to have a moment to get, splash some water on my face, get a drink, get a snack if I need it. So I don't like rolling up late to things because I don't do well with the stress.
I feel that. You remind me to invite you to my birthday dinner. Like, you're a friend that's necessary. So first of all, why don't we start with why don't you give us an introduction of yourself, your names, pronouns, who you are, how you been amidst the pandemic, the panorama, the Polaroid.
All real questions.
Yes.
My name is Benji Hart. Mm-hmm. I am originally from Amherst, Massachusetts. That's where I grew up. But I've been living here in Chicago for almost 9 years now.
Okay, hybrid. Okay, transplant.
Thank you.
You here.
Keep it real. Be honest. And I am an author, artist, educator, abolitionist. Yes. I do a lot of youth work, specifically around defunding and abolishing the police and other carceral white supremacist systems of violence and oppression. I am a poet, I'm a writer, I'm a performer, and a lot of my performance involves improvisational movement and spoken word.
Come on, list them.
And I'm a they, them, I prefer they, them pronouns.
Yes.
Identify as Black, queer, non-binary, gender non-conforming.
Come on, non-binaries. Yes.
Femme is also very important to me.
Yes. Well, happy Pride Month. You were the absolute person that came to my mind when I thought about Pride. I'm a queer Scorpio, non-binary femme. I feel like niggas finally are on the train and stop calling women females. So it's like, I've been shouting that out for the longest, so you'll finally get it. A fellow fuckboy abolitionist. So we're on this together, but I wanted to have a very clear, transparent, honest conversation to hold as an archive. And I feel like you were the perfect person for that. So thank you so much for being here today.
Of course.
Thank you. So before I forget, since we got a long interview, y'all, Benji is important, okay? Important. I came out with this whole outline on point, so I want to get through it all. But before I forget, this is a segment called What's Your Thought Juice? Dun-dun-dun. And what's your thought juice?
First of all, I love this question. You had to introduce me to this question.
Okay. You did ask me
thought juice? Explain that. But once you did, I was like, oh, okay, I got you. So the thought juice that I'm sipping on tonight is really a perfect representation of my taste in drinks. It's Maker's Mark. So I love a good brown liquor.
If y'all report, you said down for anything brown.
Down for anything brown
when
it comes to liquor.
Yes.
And then some ginger beer, and some cherry lemonade.
We hood cocktailists.
It is so good. And these are not things that I would have necessarily thought to mix. They go together so perfect.
Okay, cool.
It's like exactly what I want.
Okay, great. I was going to drop some cherries in it, but I was pressed for time. And I also got you, shout out to Barefoot Bubbly doing a limited edition Pride Month
It's
champagne.
that time of the year.
It's that time of the year. And next thing you know, they're going to have a Christmas one. I mean, we probably one more holiday before we hear Mariah Carey at the grocery store.
It's getting close.
But my thing is like, something I was thinking about, I was like, so if Mariah Carey rules like Christmas and she makes like 18 million like for like a holiday, does Diana Ross get the same? Or is like, are we done with I'm Coming Out? I'm done with I'm Coming Out.
That's a good question, because I do feel like it is a classic. I also feel like the girls are not as up on their history as they should be.
Yes.
Like the girls aren't reaching for the deep cuts and the OQ tracks like
the Donna
they
Summers
should be.
Seasons of Love.
I feel like as a queer community, we could be going for the dusty in ways that we're not.
Shay La Femme.
Some of us, you know what I'm
Yes.
saying? But also, what's it called? All I Want for Christmas Is You is like, that will just not die. The girls will never be
Never. No, Mariah Carey is going to be rich forever.
I wouldn't have predicted that, but she did that.
You actually opened up the topic on a really good hand. So again, happy Pride Month to you, to me, to us, to the Hoodwives. How are festivities looking for you for this month? I personally was turned off away from like the white pride and like the just the cis hetero men pandering of bisexual women. I don't know if pandering was the right word, but leeching of bisexual women and just like white men in spaces. But how do you and your communities honor the true history of Pride? Maybe you can give us a little breakdown, what we need to know.
I was a part of the group of Black, trans, and queer folks who blocked the Chicago Pride Parade in 2015. Mm-hmm. And we called ourselves Blackout Pride. Mm-hmm. And that was sort of our early attempt mm-hmm. at trying to insert some abolitionist politics back into Pride, because I would argue they have always been there. Mm-hmm. And it's the removing of abolition, it's the removing of mm-hmm. resistance to state violence that is anti-Pride.
Yes.
So I think that was an early attempt on the part of like Black, trans, and queer abolitionists to try and reinsert mm-hmm. abolition into Pride and blocking the parade, stopping the parade, to call for the defunding and abolishing of police, prisons, and the military, and the reinvestment of those resources into trans and queer communities, specifically Black, brown, immigrant, indigenous, trans, and queer communities. So I think for me, disrupting the festivities, not just, not just divesting from them, which I'm also about. Pride Month will primarily be spent on my couch for me.
Yes.
But also disrupting them.
Right.
And a group of organizers, I was not a part of this group of organizers, but a group of young trans and queer people of color organized a Take Back Pride march.
This is so cool.
Last fall, because Pride was canceled.
Yeah.
And so grassroots organizers really took it upon themselves to throw their own march and make it about Black trans lives, make it about defunding the Chicago Police Department. And it was making it about freeing Palestine. They were actively uplifting Palestine at that march. And those girls are going to be back on it again this year, I believe, June 27th.
Okay, so June 27th, Hoodwives, please stay out on the lookout for that, and we'll make sure to get all the information to support you. But like, I was just looking at you speaking, I was like, yep, you're doing it. You're blowing my mind.
And yeah, I was not a part of organizing that march, but I will definitely be there. It was a phenomenal, inspiring event last year that really centered Black trans people, really centered trans people of color, and really centered political demands beyond just representation.
Because that's what it's supposed to be about. Like, especially if we think back to like Marsha P. Johnson, right? And if I'm not mistaken, please correct me if I'm wrong, like Pride actually started because Marsha like threw, like, it was a protest. And like, I think the story is like Marsha threw a brick at a cop's head or something like that. But Pride was originally like started for a protest. And so it just became like a whole like whitewashed notion. But maybe you can take this moment to educate me on like the history of pride parades, and you've given us a lot of events to show what it's supposed to be about.
Real tea. So for the girls who don't know, Pride commemorates the Stonewall riots.
The Stonewall resistance, right?
The Stonewall riots is what they're usually referred to as, but Stonewall resistance, Stonewall turn up, whatever you want to call it, which was not the first documented clash between queer people, trans people, specifically trans people of color, with the police. There are actually riots dating back even decades before Stonewall that are documented, which means there's all kinds of resistance that is not documented. But Stonewall, we kind of commemorate collectively as the birth of Pride because so much organizing happened in its wake.
Yes.
No one knows. Folks like to kind of say Marsha threw the first brick. No one knows exactly who threw the first what. It's a little debated. Okay, so
pardon me.
But we certainly credit Marsha, right? And we certainly credit Sylvia Rivera.
Yes,
who were both there.
Yes,
and were both participating.
Yes,
and were both actively clashing with.
May you pronounce her name again?
Sylvia Rivera.
Sylvia Rivera.
That's right.
We love to recognize two queens.
And so she was a Boricua trans woman. Marsha P was a Black trans woman. Marsha Payton No Mind Johnson was a Black trans woman. And both of them were a part of the Stonewall Uprising, the Stonewall Rebellion. And they went on to found STAR, Street Transvestite Action Revolutionaries.
Oh.
To create. That's right. And I believe that was after Stonewall. I believe that was kind of inspired by Stonewall. To provide resources directly to trans and queer young people in New York experiencing houselessness. And per your point, I think another part of the history that we don't actively know is that Marsha P. Johnson and Sylvia Rivera were both at the Stonewall Rebellion, but also founded the first Pride March a year later. The first Pride March was
I didn't know
a commemoration of the year after.
Like a celebration of
And they called it actually the Christopher Street March, Christopher Street Day March, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. So it was a march. They didn't call it a parade.
I'm loving all of this this history because it's so necessary. Like it's going to be amazing to see as an archive.
And then the last thing I'm gonna say,
please do,
is that was 1970 because Stonewall was 1969. The first
this was in the 60s.
The late 60s.
This is in the 60s.
Which means the girls was turning up.
This is like Jackie Brown.
That's right. That's right. Which means the girls was turning up a long time before that. Yes. You know what I'm saying? But so Stonewall riots is 1969. The Christopher Street Liberation Day March, if I'm not mistaken, was a year later, so 1970. By 1973, Marsha P. Johnson and Sylvia Rivera were banned from participating in the march that they themselves had actually founded because it was already as early as the early 1970s being taken over by primarily white cis gays and lesbians who wanted it to be about mainstreaming the queer community, the gay and lesbian community, wanting it to be about acceptance and sort of showing that gay and lesbian people were normal and were a part of your everyday
just like
community.
Commercializing.
It was very much setting the stage, no tea, no shade, but very much setting the stage for the mainstreaming of Pride, the corporatizing of Pride, and Pride as frankly a way to mainstream queer and trans people. Make it a holiday rather than seeing it as a protest, seeing it as a political demonstration, and seeing it, I would argue, as actually a celebration of being outside of these oppressive systems, not trying to enter them.
You segue like on a lot of perfect topics. Like, I'm so happy that you said that. I didn't even know that. Like, I've watched the Marsha P. Johnson documentary, but I still didn't know that. So I always like to leave myself open for education. I miss being educated so much. So just thank you for telling me that. It's a lot of topics in there that I want to get to later, but a lot of work that you do is heavily centered around like Black radicalism. So what does Black radicalism mean?
Oh, that's a good question.
Because when I think of so there's a poem that comes to my mind by Denise Smith, twerking as a twerking as a radical form of healing.
Yes.
So I think that being radical looks many different ways for people. So is there a way for Black folks to imagine love or healing around themselves radically?
And I love Dennis Smith, that poem in particular.
Yes.
That's almost like, in so many ways, the embodiment of Black radicalism for me.
Yes.
But
shaking that ass.
You know, as we say, you know, radical means to the root. So when I say radicalism, I'm talking about getting to the root of the systems and structures that are harming us, and not pruning them or
defining them.
Right, but actually uprooting them so that they do not regrow.
Right.
That they are uprooted.
Get to the root of it to pluck it.
Exactly.
Got it.
But I would say also that's not just about systems of oppression. It's also about, exactly as you say, it's also about healing. It's also about joy.
Yeah.
Where are the roots of those things, and how do we get to the root of those things? Not to uproot them, but to protect them, to allow them to flourish, to nurture them. So it's always a root focus. It's always looking at.
It's like some mirroring work.
Yes. Where does this thing fundamentally come from, and is it something that needs to be uprooted, or is it something that needs to be nurtured and fed and supported?
No, I feel that, because like the way I see it is like it kind of like juxtaposes each other. Like if something like gives you like supports you radically, like makes you feel radical, there is a reason why that thing is making you happy. Like for me, like even as like Dinesh Cummings' example in the title, like twerking, you know, that's a sense of reclamation. You know what I'm saying? It is a joyful thing, but it's reclaiming my body. It's reclaiming the space around me and saying, you know, I'm not for the fuckery. I'm not for the touching. I'm not for anybody, for myself. Yes. So I see them going very hand in hand with each other. And I get what you mean, like that root. Like, why do I feel the need to twerk like I lost my fucking mind?
Yes. And this is where, for me, and that poem, as an example, codifies it so perfectly. This is where, for me, my Blackness and my queerness, my Blackness and my feminist are inseparable. I can't be Black without being femme. I can't be queer.
That intersectionality.
Without being Black. If you take my Blackness away, I'm not queer anymore. If you take my queerness away, my feminist away, I'm not Black anymore. They're actually deeply a part of each other and connected to each other. And exactly, the twerking is a perfect.
That was a quote.
I can't.
You just quoted. No, you just quoted. Like, if you take away my femininity from me, I'm not Black anymore.
No.
If you take my queerness away from me, I'm not Black anymore.
No.
Like, and it goes on.
That's
like, I'm so tired of cutting you off, but like, that's a fucking quote. Because I always say that like white women can't consider themselves feminists if you have no intersection to your life. Because I feel like you're like a direct descendant of like the patriarchy, like being that you are the most protected woman in America. And also like you, like there's like a lethalness that comes to you being in like Black spaces. So it's like just like that element, or like just that thought of like intersectionality really like being a backbone, like a staple, a cornerstone of all your identities. And it's like Blackness is rooted in all of those. Like Blackness is the post.
Yes.
So without those, I have no post. Come on, Benji.
Yes.
Come on, Benji. Come on.
And like the Ness Smith poem, it's like twerking is a reclaiming of body.
Yes.
But it's also a reclaiming of sexuality.
Yes.
It's also a reclaiming of femininity. It's also a reclaiming of raucous Blackness, of unapologetic Blackness, of non-respectable Blackness, as actually the most sacred form of Blackness and the one most deserving of protection and celebration. And that is like, ooh, like that's it. And I think queerness and Blackness at their core are doing the same thing, which is actually celebrating what is abject, actually saying, I don't want to be a part of these systems. These systems are the problem.
Yes.
And the more outside of these systems I am, the more oppressed I might be, but also the more free I am at the same time. And living in a world where we have the freedom without the oppression. You understand?
You're so fucking smart. You're so fucking smart. You got quotables.
I appreciate it.
Like, I don't want to be a part of the system. Like, that's really it. Like, yeah, that's exactly how I feel. I don't want to be a part of the system. Like, even when I talked to past guests like about like my love and passion for music, and like even just thinking about that whole like imagery system. Like, I always say I don't want to be a part of that, but it's like something about just just fighting for myself. Brittany taught me that, like, you know, you have to get in the door to break it down. And so it's just like, I don't know, I'm kind of on a tangent, but I do want to know, like, is Black radicalism like surrounded in healing work? And like, if so, like, what is healing work? And like, how do like Black and brown folks, or how have Black and brown folks always been connected to healing work? I think that there's like some type of like, when I hear healing work, there's some type of like romanticization that happens. Like you think of like, you know, witches, brujeria, or like, you know, voodoo as a religion. And, you know, I'm not speaking on something I don't know, but I think that there is like a lot of work that I see happen with people that take healing work like serious. Like some people consider themselves healers of the world. Some people consider themselves, you know, educators, storytellers of the world. But how does like healing work connect to Black radicalism? And if that's in all Black and brown folks?
That's a profound question. I would love to hear your response as well.
Yeah.
I think for me, I would say, I think you're already touching on it, but for me, I would say, as a 32-year-old, I'm coming out of a period of a lot of really intense healing and a lot of really intense sort of personal work and working through healing from painful, hurtful, traumatizing events in my life. That's really taken some years of active work to reflect on, work through, and confront. And I'm very proud of where I'm at. And it's taught me so much about how healing is not a destination. It's a forever and an ongoing process. And it's also taught me about how healing is so painful.
Yes.
I think we associate the word healing often with calm and soothing and relief, and these like good feelings,
like a bath,
like
some lights,
like the pain being taken away,
right?
As opposed to the pain being confronted, as opposed to the pain being acknowledged, as opposed to the
and like putting, like investing yourself back into that.
Yes.
Like that's like really fucking hard work.
And that, not to be too extended metaphor, but you know, it's like when
I'm a poet, honey. Give it to me.
You're right. I really do feel that it's like when you cut yourself, the healing isn't when the cut is gone. The healing is the cleaning, the wound. The healing is you might need some stitches. The healing is putting the Band-Aid on.
That's a perfect metaphor.
And then the Band-Aid gets nasty and you got to take the Band-Aid off and replace it with a new one.
Yes.
Like healing is actually the long, messy, often really unpleasant part of the process that, you know, if you ignore it will result in much more pain down the road. If I don't clean it, if I don't treat it, if I don't take the steps I need to take now to address the wound, it's going to cause me so much more pain and grief down the road. So it's actually doing the work that I know is necessary now, even though I actually very well don't want to do it. And actually doing it is not fun. And actually doing it doesn't feel good. It's painful, it's draining, it's exhausting.
And it's so much upkeep.
It's
like you have to keep changing those bandages.
That's right.
You have to keep applying Neosporin. And like that was like the romanticizing factor. That metaphor was perfect. Because I think like so much nowadays, everybody loves a healed person now. You know what I'm saying? Like, oh my gosh, like you fixed yourself. Like you're put together. And I'm like, bitch, no, I'm not. Like, little do you know your dick is healing me, like, as we speak. But like, I feel like that isn't like qualified for healing. You know, I'm just like a really honest person with myself, shall I say. You know what I'm saying? And I think that with my healing work, and I can't speak for all Black people, but I just speak to Black people, I think healing work has also been framed a lot around religion. So like that idea of like healing work or healing power is really just manifested in prayer and reboot and re-strengthen, loving yourself and loving yourself and loving yourself. And I'm here to call bullshit on that. You know what I'm saying? Like saying like I love myself also doesn't, like, that completely, just to sum that up and highlight that as a header, completely invalidates the fact that no, someone hurt me and I want some apologies. A group of people hurt me and I want some apologies. Like, we live in a country that still hasn't apologized for slavery. Right. I'm like still healing from that. You know what I'm saying? So I think that people see healing as just like this just one-way street that's just between you and whatever you have destined, and then that's the end of it. And then you're like fixed and ready for whatever. But I think that there is like a lot of like work that needs to be happening. Like sometimes you have to interact with people. Sometimes you have to like, you know, tip back into like, you know, not your old ways, but like what made your old feelings. Exactly what you said, your old feelings that, you know, wants to make you realize the answers of where that came from. I mean, that's just how I feel about it, but I don't know if that makes sense, but
it makes a lot of sense. I think there's a lot to dig into there. I'm thinking about Rachel Jackson's poem about Job.
Yeah.
It's like one of my favorite poems. Yes.
With the blisters, yes.
And talking about, right, it's so interesting.
I love Rachel's book for that, yes.
I do too. But yeah, I was really impacted by that poem the first time I heard her perform it. And just thinking about so much of my own experiences as a Black person, particularly as a Black queer person in religious spaces. And yeah,
so we got it. We touched on it. Yes.
But I think there's a theme in so much of Black life.
Yeah.
We're always navigating oppressive systems, and we're always seeking joy inside of those oppressive systems.
Yes.
Justice inside of those oppressive systems, healing inside of those oppressive systems.
Yeah.
And I think Black people are ingenious at sort of cobbling together our own unique ways of seeking those things and of generating those things inside of systems that were never meant for us to have those things. But I also think that means that it can be hard to separate oppression from healing sometimes, and it can be hard to actually tease out like which parts of this are healing and supporting me, and which parts of this are actually part of contributing to the harm.
Exactly.
So often it's both, and so often it's not a clear line.
Right.
And I think religion, including Christianity, can serve an incredibly healing role in people's lives in ways that I'm deeply respectful of and appreciative. And I also really appreciate like Rachel's perspective, particularly on like, I was told that,
shout out to Rachel Jackson. Make sure y'all listen to that episode.
He'll never put more on me than I can bear. So if I can't bear it, that means there's something wrong with me.
And that's the thing about like a systemic oppression. Like systemic, like it's a domino effect. Like the systemic oppression that a Black man might go through like CPD 12s. Right. Like I am like direct, you know, I'm the result of his oppression. You know what I'm saying? Like I'm like the first punching bag as a Black woman. As his like, and then that's another systemic oppression. So it's like we all fall under this. So it's like to just say healing is like one way path. It's like, no, we got to zip through all these things. And I think that when we think about healing for a grander community, I really applaud the work that you do to have the mind space and the brain work to see, to break down and compartmentalize like all the avenues of a community or for your community, shall I say, and what that healing and radicalism looks like, what those different roots look like. You a gardener.
I love that.
I just wanted to validate that. I appreciate that. Like you dropping gems. I really believe that like a real revolution has no allies. Like you can't like, you know, I don't want to explain myself. I feel that in my heart.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? Like you can't no allies help build and repair with their resources, with their networks, with their faces, their blood, their bodies. It can't happen, you know what I'm saying, until like we build it ourselves. You know what I'm saying? That's when the real revolution begins. But how can work and radicalism for like Black and brown folks or Black and brown spaces like be protected against like white infiltration? Is that even possible? Because I think that's where like, in my opinion, I would see like healing work for Black and brown people being without white people. I know that's like probably like a heavily loaded question, but like I'm really curious. Like, can we really get to a place without white people? I know we can. I had to say it out loud.
That's it's a really good question. It's a really hard question.
Yeah.
I think. I'm a say.
Yeah. This is my say stuff.
I'm gonna say something. I'm gonna see if I believe it.
Yeah.
I'm actually dropping this like mini workshop for Pride Month. For this program called For the Culture.
I would love to
that
join.
OTV is.
I just did some with OTV.
So you might even see
Shout out to them.
OTV is with it.
Yes.
But it's all about solidarity and the heartbreak of solidarity, that solidarity is actually a really heartbreaking practice.
Yes.
And a heartbreaking commitment because people let you down.
Yes.
And that's actually a part of solidarity.
Yes.
I try to argue. It doesn't mean solidarity has failed, but it's something that, like any relationship, like any form of love, we're like actually agreeing to some hurt and agreeing to some harm. And how do we make that choice responsibly? Because I would never say the revolution is dependent on us harming ourselves, or the revolution is dependent on us agreeing to hurt and mistreatment. That's different from saying what I believe, which is that the revolution requires all of us, and we are all messy and imperfect.
You're correct.
And we can't do anything alone, which means that by agreeing to do things collectively and by agreeing to do things as a community, we're agreeing to walk into spaces as our messy selves with other messy ass people. And that means we're going to let each other down sometimes, that we will be let down, but we will also let other people down. And how do we make space and acceptance for that, which is different than making space and acceptance for abuse, for mistreatment, for
unaccountability,
for lack of accountability, for harm. Not talking about that. Not talking about that. But I am talking about mistakes, and I am talking about people making mistakes and being wrong and hurting each other. Because that is a part of being a person. It's a part of being in community.
When I hear, because like when I was listening to you speak, something that kept coming to my mind when you said revolution is like the revolution will not be televised. The revolution will not be televised, right? And I was thinking, I was like, do white people televise our revolution? Like, do their allyship, do their solidarity televise the revolution? Like, are they the faces that bring, that brings the attention to us? Like, yeah, we're white people and we're speaking up because, we hold white guilt, and I don't want to be like a bad white person. And so I'm going to hold my body here to show my solidarity, and that's what attracts the attention. Whereas like a black folks revolution gets deemed as looting, rioting. Right. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, I wonder, what is that trajectory, if that's the right word? Or like, what does that just like look like on the grand scheme? Like, what does liberation look like for black and brown queer folks, in your opinion?
Let me know if this answers your question.
Okay. I'm
thinking about Nikita Slade, who was a black queer woman and a part of Syracuse Black Lives Matter, who passed away recently.
Okay.
And so I learned about her work from her passing. I didn't know about her work before she passed.
Okay.
But a beautiful quote of hers that I've been returning to a lot recently is she talks about solidarity as an invitation. And I love that so much because I think that is so much of what the work we're trying to do is an attempt at. And I think is actually most effective when it is an invitation. So rather than, and I think I might even include white people in this, rather than making like a commitment to work with white folks, which is not a commitment I'm interested in making.
I feel that.
Working abolition as an example, building abolitionist networks and coalitions and campaigns as invitations to a world without police and prisons, and welcoming anyone who's ready to accept that invitation. And that being different than, I'm gonna go here and try and get this group of people who, in the case of white people, are deeply invested in maintaining the police and prison system, are deeply invested in maintaining racial capitalism, and try to convince them to come over and work with us. That is not something I'm interested in doing.
You're right.
But having a clear vision, working with people who are impacted and who are down to really wrestle out and try and make that vision concrete, and opening it up to folks who are ready to come, for me feels like actually a very different practice of solidarity. Because it can surprise you who will show up. Right. You don't always know who's going to show up. And when you've decided this community is for it and this community is not, you might be surprised when you might be wrong. Right. Some folks in this community that you thought was down may very well turn out not to be.
Yes.
And some folks in this community who are like, they're
not. There's a lot of people that.
They might have there might be some folks over there who are ready to accept that invitation. So for me as a black person, I think that's important to think about for non-black people of color, but even for white folks, that it's like, this is an invitation, and I'm not gonna invest myself or interject myself into spaces where I'm the only Black person and where I'm going to be mistreated and misunderstood and harmed. But I am going to open up the invitation. And if brown folks are ready to accept that invitation, I want you here. If white folks are ready to accept that invitation, and understand what that invitation is asking of them, understand what entering into the space, the movement, the vision is asking of them, the more people, the more hands, the better. Because there's nothing, I can't do any of this alone. So I just love, again, let me know if that answers your question.
It does.
But I love Nikita's word of invitation. It's less about like forcing things and more about creating a space and often being surprised about who's willing to enter.
That does. And it led me to another like segue question / thought. Like, I wonder if like also with extending that invitation, does there come with a sense of responsibility? And I hate to use that word, but with Black and brown folks, with like maybe like rules of like what this invitation looks like. I think about Chima. Shout out to Chima. Please follow her at Naira Bills on Twitter. She released a Twitter thread of what to do at protests, like the most thorough shit I've ever seen, you know. And what comes to something that came to my mind was like how like a lot of white folks use that opportunity to photograph the movement. And they see them just being there as an act of solidarity, but they don't take like, you know, you photographing people's faces, you photographing people's tattoos, you photographing people's, you know, appearance that can like police them. Do you think that with extending that invitation that, I don't want to say that we should be more selective, shall I say, but like more advising with these invitations?
I think that's absolutely right.
Yeah.
And I think having expectations.
Yeah. Like real expectations, like being real with yourself. Like some white people are gonna mess up.
That's right.
Right.
And that there's consequences for when you mess up.
Right.
As there should be for any of us.
Yes.
As there should be for any of us.
Yes.
Yes. No, I think that's extremely important. And I think expectations are not oppressive.
Yeah.
I think.
Oh, I love these quotes.
I think guidelines to how you want to be treated are things that need to be negotiated. But having guidelines and having demands for how you expect to be treated is not oppressive. It's important, especially when you're a person of color, especially when you're a woman, especially when you're femme, especially when you're trans. It's like, no, that's important.
Yes.
And people, the invitation is conditional.
Yes.
The invitation is conditional. And if you can't uphold the expectations, that invitation can be rescinded.
Yes. How you doing on a drink? Would you like another?
I'm doing great.
Okay, cool.
I told you earlier, but you know, I got a bike home.
Yes.
So I'm not trying to get too turned.
Yes.
Trying to be responsible.
I'll always make sure you get home safe. If you need a ride and like, I'll always figure it out.
Thank you so much.
I do want to take a moment to highlight Brave Space Alliance.
Yes.
So Brave Space Alliance is the first Black trans led LGBTQ plus center on the fucking South Side. Shout out to y'all. Please tell me more. Please tell me more. Like Brave Space Alliance, like how's the organization come to? Like how can we like support? Like how can I get involved? How can others get involved? What resources? Anything.
I am not like on staff at BSA, but that's a lot of my duties. That's a lot of my good girlfriends.
You've done great work there.
There's some, I know those girls well. And Lasaya Wade, who is the executive director, if I'm not mistaken, is her title. The founder and executive director of Brave Space Alliance. We worked together at briefly in a org called the Black Trans and Gender Nonconforming Collective, which is no longer in existence. It was an experiment. We tried it for a little while, but that's where me and Lasaya work together the most closely. And so I love her very much and I really trust her work. And I think part of what was so interesting about BTGNC Collective, we originally got together to stage a protest for Titi Safour, who was a Black trans woman who was killed on the West Side in 2016, if I remember correctly.
What's her name again?
Titi Safour.
Titi Safour.
Yeah. And she was sadly murdered on the West Side. And we staged a protest in Boys Town, trying to call attention to her murder and demanding resources.
I've never been to Boys Town.
Don't recommend it.
Nothing.
You know, It's always good to have your experiences. You know, go if you want to have an experience, but it's not a place that I hang out at anymore.
I feel that.
It was a place I hung out at as a younger person.
Right. And it's a place
not so much a place I hang out
to hold a movement for TT some more.
You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
But all that's to say that part of the reason the collective ended up disbanding, which didn't happen in a bad way, it just happened in a like, we're gonna try something new. Was that folks really wanted to do different kinds of work. And we had all come together for this protest for TT Safor, but then we all kind of had different ideas of where to go from there. Some people wanted a social space for Black trans folks. Some people wanted political organizing for Black trans folks. Some folks wanted to distribute resources to Black trans folks. And so everyone kind of had different visions for what they wanted a Black trans space to be doing.
Right.
And I think Lasaya had the clearest vision of like starting an organization and really creating like a physical space
and that's
that trans people could enter. And even back then, she was really naming that. She was like, I hear what y'all are saying, but this is what I think is needed, and this is what I see myself doing. And she just followed through, and now BSA is a thing. She just said, this is what I'm gonna do, and now BSA is a thing. So you can like just knowing her trajectory is just so inspirational for me.
That is inspirational for me, and like I've recognized you from a lot of work you've done there. Like I told you in my conversation with Jamila, that's what I really want to do. I wanted to take a moment to just shout that out because like I've never seen a center like that on the South Side. I most recently just did a commission poem. I can't say who, but you'll find out later. It's for something big, and we were working for donations, and I was working for donations to BSA.
Amazing.
So I really appreciate all the work that y'all do. Please make sure y'all support Brave Space Alliance. Like we need to see it. We love to see it, just thank you for the work and for the other femmes and leaders there. Yes. I want to talk a little bit about some joys. So we got through the work.
I love it.
Let's do some joy. This is our Kiki moment. Yes. Okay. So you have been published in like Teen Vogue, The Advocate, everywhere. I'm gonna make an anthology. I feel like I'm feeling my whiskey. I'm so excited. Like I'm very proud for that chapter of this interview, and like I want this chapter like so much more. But like you're I was doing research on you, and you so fucking badass. You're so prolific and just everywhere, and I mean everywhere in the best way possible. And I'm gonna get to that subject later, but just like have you had your head to everything, I'm so inspired by that because that's what I want to do. I'm so talented. I'm so multiverse.
We know that.
Thank you. But it's like, you know, you got tentacles. You know?
Come on. There it is. There it is.
So, but like you also were published in like a book of essays. You published essays, poems, including Elements of Vogue, a case study in radical performance. It's been a word. That's a title. I need that. What is the backstory of like your passions, the pen, the stage? When did you begin writing, dancing? What's the story?
I love that.
Yeah.
I first started writing poetry in second grade. We had a poetry unit when I was in second grade, and I loved it.
Yes.
And I had
Did you watch A Different World growing up?
I didn't actually. I mean, I remember the reruns on TV, but I didn't like watch it religiously.
Disappointed.
Is the truth.
I
just want to be transparent.
Okay.
Because it was a little bit before my time. Yeah. And so I remember the reruns being on TV, but I still in my youth I was like, oh, that's that old people show.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? I wasn't ready. I wasn't hip enough.
But second grade, these poetry units, I had units like that at school too.
But yeah, I just had I was very blessed to have great public school teachers who were really encouraging of my writing and told me to write and told me to keep writing, and I listened to them. And it was in high school actually that I joined a hip hop theater program, not unlike YCA, for young people in the community that I was growing up in. So I joined
Kumba Links in high school. So.
Very Kumba Links. Very Kumba Links.
Shout out KL.
Yes. So hip hop theater, spoken word elements of hip hop,
yes,
dance,
the branches,
and theater all combined. And that was, I feel like, where I really got a passion for spoken word, because I had been doing more sort of traditional poetry up to that point.
Yeah.
So learning and getting attuned with spoken word was really at Project 2050 was the name of the program.
Oh, wait, I heard something like that. It was something like After School Matters has something like that. Oh, Gallery 55.
Okay, I don't know.
It was just another branch of After School. Pardon me for cutting you off, but like it was just like, I think Gallery 55 was like something that really like help students breathe their hyphens.
Okay.
Like, yeah. Please continue.
I don't know that one, but I'm gonna look them up.
Yes.
And then it was when I was 16. I came out when I was 14.
Mm-hmm.
As queer, wasn't using that word at the time, but that's when I marked my beginnings. And really struggled understanding what that meant and who my community was until I found Vogue and until I found the ballroom scene when I was about 16. And that was like really a revolution in my life.
Yes. I really want to talk to you. I really want to talk to you about Vogue and ballroom, because I really got to get to that conversation. But I do want to take a moment to highlight your poetry for just a quick second. So I was reading one of your erasure poems, Laylene's Bill with Revisions. And the line that really inspired me was, sex workers will spray paint the words, "We are the intervention" on the courthouse rubble. I love that you're not like a cheesy poet. You know what I'm saying? Because like people that's mostly hyping it, they're usually cheesy poets. And you're not. So like, what does the intervention mean? We are the intervention. Because I see that in so many ways.
That poem was written for Laylene Polanco, who was an Afro-Dominican trans woman who died in solitary confinement in Rikers Island in New York.
May I say her name again?
Laylene Polanco.
Laylene Polanco.
And she, part of the reason she was picked up was because of prostitution charges.
Word. Walking tracks.
She had a disability and she had an epileptic episode while in solitary confinement.
Oh, wow.
And that's how she died.
Unattended to, unsupervised, just everything.
Solitary is torture,
right.
Solitary confinement.
Right.
So this bill was written in her name that basically expanded, to put it in simplest terms, expanded incarceration for trans folks. And so it was about making incarceration more trans friendly. And so I wanted to rewrite that bill, demanding the things that Black trans folks actually deserve and what would actually result in Black trans liberation, which is not trans inclusive incarceration. And so that line in particular, as someone who's not a sex worker and has never done sex work, that line is important to me because I think sex workers have been at the forefront of almost every revolutionary movement.
Big facts.
Period.
No, you're speaking facts. You're speaking facts.
And so when I say that, you know, sex workers are the intervention, it's because sex workers are overwhelmingly women, overwhelmingly femmes, overwhelmingly Black, overwhelmingly trans and indigenous. They are just on the forefront. And even within feminist communities, even within queer and trans communities, are marginalized, are distrusted, are looked down upon.
And when I think of like intervention, like I think of like the block, like the wall of a stop it.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? Like that intervention is keeping a lot of people's lives protected.
That's right.
A lot of people's identities protected.
That's right.
And I wanted to talk on this up because I am a former sex worker. And so in my whole idea of what I've been through in my process of sex working, I always considered it an exchange of goods for services. And when I explain that to people, it's like, yeah, well, you know, when you're a teen who doesn't have a place to stay, you know, you sometimes you give yourself for a bed. Sometimes you give, my experience, I've given myself for a bed. I've given myself for a meal. I've given myself for a lot of things just for a means of my survival. And I feel like when we talk about sex work, in day and age, is so glazed, like Black women's guide of sex work is so glazed over, and their survivalhood for that is so glazed over. because of things like OnlyFans romanticizing it. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Okay.
and I'm not discrediting another woman's work source. I'm not discrediting another woman's guide of survival. You know what I'm saying? But I think that when the conversation begins, we have to look at the whole scope. You know what I'm saying? It's not just money in hand. You know what I'm saying? It's not a Stripe account transferred to you. You know, there's a lot of people, a lot of women who put themselves in sex work, whether they identify with themselves or not, that's completely their choice. But I think that we need to understand that, like, it's way bigger than what we, like, just assume it to be. It's not walking in the streets, and it's not just OnlyFans.
There's so much.
It's so much to it.
It's a huge umbrella.
It's a huge umbrella. Like, it's a huge umbrella, and I really appreciate you for that poem, because that's what really stuck out to me. Because, like, yeah, like, damn right, I'm the fucking intervention.
That's right.
Like, yeah, like I intervened in my own life. When my mom or niggas couldn't do for me, I did for myself. I intervened myself to still be here. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm getting so fucking emotional right now. I'm so sorry.
You better drop it on.
But it's like, I'm still fucking here.
Right.
Because of me.
You better fucking drop it on.
Whew. I'm sorry. Pardon me.
No, that means so. Again, as someone who's not a sex worker, like I
love that poem.
No, I give you so much fucking ups. I give you so much fucking love and appreciation. You are the motherfucking intervention, and that you could make that connection to your own life is so.
I'm gonna get that tattooed on me.
And you just fucking drop so much. Like, I need to process.
I appreciate that. I haven't cried on the episode yet. So we're like here, like
There's a white trans woman. I'm embarrassed that I can't remember her name. But a white trans woman, sex worker, an activist for the decriminalization of sex work, who says, people degrade sex workers, and we have this language around sex work of selling your body. And her whole thing is, what worker isn't selling their body? What worker
is it selling their hands, their mind, their energy,
their
spirit,
health,
their health, their anxiety, their everything.
Exactly.
Their everything.
And her whole thing is, we are all, unless you're a capitalist, we're all selling our body.
Big purr.
If you are a worker under capitalism, you are selling your body. So why are we projecting our morality onto one type of person who sells their body for goods, for cash, for whatever, and not everybody else? Because we're actually all, unless you own the means of capital, which the vast majority of us don't, you are selling your body for.
And that's like the romanticizing factor. Like, it goes hand in hand. Like, you think like once you get a 9 to 5, your life is set. Baby, it's not. Right. And you think that once like you like submit yourself to like, into a sex working field, whatever that distribution looks like for you, like your life is set. It's not. Like, I'm hungry. I'm gonna be hungry tomorrow. Like, it ain't Red Lobster.
And I think what we learn, what I have learned from sex workers, let me make statements. What I have learned from sex workers is that is yet another tool of oppression. Yeah. To have us judging what people do to survive, the interventions that people are making in their own lives to survive, instead of looking around and saying we are all being forced to survive.
Exactly. Like,
and none of us. That's not the way any of us should be living.
Please support your friends. Please support your friends' OnlyFans. Like, instead of like paying for, like going to a Pornhub person that you do not know, paying for a Brazzers account that you do not know, pay for your OnlyFans, like your OnlyFriends. Pay a subscription fee. Like just support your friends. Like, I appreciate that moment with you. But little highlight moment, because we're winding down. I'm so fucking sad. But you're a beautiful dancer. And so, like, I'm in the House of Moscow. Shout out House of Moscow. I really want to, like, do performance, film Vogue performance. But I'm only entitled to face, body, sex, siren, and runway. But I feel like I would get chopped because I can't dance. Like, I'm like, if the category is calling for Tina, I can't dance in no Tina dress. I can't do no death drop in a Tina dress.
Was they calling for Tina?
A lot of them were. Someone was like, bring it Latina.
Okay, I'm sorry that they did that, but that also sounds so cute.
It does.
I do want to see that category.
I do too. But my thing is like, I can't drop it like the girls in a Tina dress. I have a lot of ass. It's a thick thunder roll, okay? But like, I guess like to the root of the question, I want to know, like, do you feel that there's like a lot of like, I don't know if misogyny is the right word, but just like a lot of like sexism or like misogynoir in like the Vogue and the blog community, like that like prohibits like non-binary femmes like myself being considered just female? And like, what is like, how can like that conversation begin to break the myth that our community is so put together and we're all on the same foot?
Right. I think the ballroom scene is first and foremost for me a Black space, which doesn't mean it's only Black people in it, but it's a Black tradition. Mm-hmm. It was created by Black folks. And there's so many elements of it that no matter who is performing or participating are Black. Right. And I think it's important to name that for a lot of reasons. But one of them being that, like any Black tradition, it is so multifaceted, it is so complicated. And as I've alluded to previously, I think I would argue that all Black traditions are both incorporating liberation and oppression at the same time, and doing this complicated dance of creating and envisioning liberation from toxic materials. Right. And that means, I think, that sometimes unavoidably the toxicity seeps in. Right. Because also it's like very male-led. That's right.
Like, I'm not right. And it's not my place to say like what one category is deemed at versus another, or who walks who and who's the actuality of who. That's not my place. But I think that's a lot of work that needs to be done amongst us. But I'm gonna throw my own ball.
Which I always always support.
We're gonna throw a ball.
And I think there's big changes happening in the scene too.
I do too.
Which is worth celebrating. Like, I know coming up in the ballroom scene, I started going to balls or participating in the scene when I was 18. Okay. So I was real young.
And you was in it. I'm so sorry we couldn't get to that. But you was in it. Like, you're going to come back. You're going to come back.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that prayer for myself. That for myself. But definitely as a young person who didn't identify as gender nonconforming or non-binary at that time, identified as like a young queer man, it was in a lot of ways my first interaction with trans folks. Yeah. And so I was seeing trans folks visibly and seeing trans folks being celebrated. And that initially was so revolutionary and liberating for me. And it took me a while, even in the scene, to be like, oh, we're really celebrating passing. And we're really celebrating cis-passing trans people. And we're really celebrating trans people who fit very specific beauty standards, and actually like trans people who don't fit into those things are chopped, and actually trans people who are not binary don't even come to the balls. Chopped. Like non-binary folks don't even come half the time. And even seeing how much that has changed, even seeing 10, 15 years later how much that has changed, and now there are legends who are non-binary, icons who are non-binary. It's not to say that we did it, we solved it, and that there isn't still misogyny, as well as I would argue like femphobia and transphobia.
Femphobia, I like that.
Like I think,
and we're gonna bring all of that to an end.
Let's do it.
We're gonna bring all of that to an end.
And I think both the girls, like the up and coming girls, but also elders, also folks who have been on the scene for a really long time. We're like, where are the non-binary folks in the scene? Where are the trans masculine folks in this scene? Like there are elders who have been pushing that for a long time. And so I think we're not just seeing the fruits of the work of like young or like new generations of girls coming up that's leading that. I think it's also the work of a lot of elders who have been fighting this uphill battle in the scene for a really long time.
That was the most perfect way to end it. I appreciate that. Well, we have come to an end, my love. I'm so saddened by this.
I know. I'm like, we could talk for 3 more hours.
No, we could. We really could. But I would love to have you back. We're going to have you back really soon. Please make sure that you follow Benji at Benji Femini. Femini, excuse me. At Benji Femini, yes. Please make sure you follow me at Loren Like Polo and us at Hoodwives of Shy, so you never miss an episode of The Real Hoodwives of Chicago. You have tuned in for another episode of The Real Hoodwives of Chicago, a real show with hot sauce stories. Yay. Thank you so much. I'm sorry we can't get to